Boom, we're live. Okay. Jodie, so I usually do a quick introduction of every guest. And for you, I'll just say AI startup founder, sold your agency for 7 figures. But the one thing that I want to say is you wrote a book, and Derek Sivers, who's a pretty well known, established entrepreneur, he wrote the foreword for it. And he wrote, every future millionaire needs this wise perspective. So I'm going to say, every future millionaire also needs to watch this episode or listen to this episode of the podcast. Not just this one, all of them, but especially this one. So thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
You got a nice view there in the background, by the way. So those of you who are just listening, not watching, that's pretty nice. You said, where are you now? Is somewhere on the West Coast, right? Of the US.
Yes, I'm in San Diego, although it doesn't really look like San Diego right now. It's not super sunny, but
Sunny
yes,
San Diego, not so sunny today.
yeah, not today.
um, Cool. So we've got a lot of things to talk about. You've had a pretty fascinating journey. You've done a lot of interesting things. But as I usually say, let's kind of start at the beginning to an extent. You started an agency fresh out of uni, sold it after 10 years. But I'm curious, what got you into entrepreneurship in the first place? I think you were 22 or so when you started. So what inspired you to, not get a job, but actually start a business?
Great question. So, yeah, I started my agency when I was 22, but before I was 22, I had 16 jobs and
Okay.
they were all different. So I worked in shops, I worked in restaurants, I worked in bars, I worked for football clubs, I did mystery shopping, I worked in a charity shop, I did almost everything. And each one taught me something different, and each one introduced me to new people, perspectives, and gave me this opinion that I had when I was 22 that was it's easy to get a job. And
Hmm.
so when I was 22 and when I graduated from university, I did a graduate scheme. Um, I actually spent 1 year working two full-time jobs. So I would work, it was meant to be a 9 to 5, but I negotiated 8 till 4. And then I also had a second job in a restaurant where I worked, I think it was like 5 nights a week and then all day Sunday as well. So I had enough saved up to be able to start a business. And then it also meant that when my friends were all applying for jobs, I was just like, why are you applying for jobs? You can apply for a job at any point. Like you can get a job at any time. It's easy. I've had 16 of them. So let's start a business. Let's do that instead. And no one that I knew actually wanted to, but I'm glad that I went ahead and started a business at 22 rather than trying to get a job.
Is that confidence? Do you think were you always quite confident, or was just well, obviously let's say track record of those 16 jobs, or what made you so convinced that you know, yeah, let's just do it.
I don't know if it was confidence. It could have been delusion. But when I first started getting jobs, it was all about independence. And it was really because I wanted to buy my own car because I thought if I've got my car, I can go anywhere I want at any time. And I really hated asking anyone for like a lift or a ride. Like I hated the fact that I'd have to say like, oh, Dad, will you drop me off here? And then that would be his evening ruined and then he wouldn't be able to do anything. And that would just be to take me to somewhere. I didn't really like getting the bus and they stopped running after a certain time. So it was all this giant plan to buy myself a car. And then the side the kind of side benefit of that was that I learned that if you show up and do a good job, people will refer you. You find it easy to get another job. And then that gave me the confidence to then try something new because I think I believed that I would just figure out how to make it a success because I kind of had done, like I had a car. I'd worked this out so
Hmm.
far. If I could do that, I could do this.
Hmm. 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 Um, it's interesting. You said I'll just figure it out. I'll just figure out how to do it, and I think that's kind of your thing, right? You wrote somewhere that I have it somewhere in my notes, but you just figure out a way, no matter what it is, right? You figure out how to get to the outcome that you want.
Yeah, I have. Yeah, this is kind of interesting actually, because I only defined this fairly recently. But I think that everyone has this success system that's their unique success system. And once they figure it out, they can apply it to anything else in their whole life. And it's what I've used to pretty much do everything I've done in different fields. And so my success system is pretty much that I figure out, like I set a goal, I set a kind of intention, and then I'll shut my eyes and visualize it coming true, and like really feel it coming true, and almost like the smells and the experience and the feeling and what people will say and what I'll say and what I'll think, and like I'll just imagine every part of it in my head. Then my next thing is I'll talk to people who've already done it. So when I sold my agency, I talked to a bunch of people who'd sold their agency and said, well, how did
Mhm.
you do it? Look, what about this? What about that? And then I use those two things to turn it into this step-by-step plan that I don't need to know all the steps. I just want to know what I need to do every single day. And with things like selling my agency and writing a book, it's been, what can I do for 30 minutes every single day that I can just keep doing that will mean it builds up, there's compound benefits, and that will lead me to getting to that outcome. And then I'll figure out what to measure. And there's always a different thing to measure. And maybe if you're growing a LinkedIn profile, it's like engagement. And maybe if you're selling an agency, it's just how many meetings do I get with buyers, or like any different one there. And then it's that's my system. And so when I realized that I could do that for something like building an agency, I was like, what if I take this exact system and apply it to powerlifting, and then apply it to writing a book, selling a business, whatever else. So I think that's where the feeling of I'll figure it out comes from, because I just think I can take my system and apply it, and then it will work out. But honestly, everyone can do this. It's just that I think people try and follow other people's systems, and they get
Mhm.
advice and they speak to consultants and they scroll the internet and consume top of funnel content that's going to give you this framework that doesn't really work for you. But really the thing is
Mhm.
to go back through all of your past successes, however big or small they are, and be like, what is the thing that I did, and how can I turn that into a method that I can apply going forward, because we're all so different.
This is awesome. I think everyone who listened, if you just heard this part, I think that that can change the way you do business or the way you approach life. I think for me, the interesting part also, you mentioned reach out to everyone and find everyone who has done something similar. So like the first step is
Yes.
kind of clarify your goal, right? Like visualize, like really know what you're, where you want to be, and I guess how you're going to feel, like what's in it for you in a way, right? How that's going to feel. And
Yeah.
reach out. I've learned that from a good friend of mine. He started a number of different businesses. Whenever he starts something new, the first thing he does is he talks to maybe 10 people who have done something similar, and he just cold messages everyone, asks connections to introduce him, and gets on the calls with all these people and asks them all the possible questions, right? And sometimes like it gets very awkward because you ask very direct questions, but you get answers. Suddenly you start understanding how do you actually start that kind of business, or how do you do this kind of thing. After you talk to a few people, like you start understanding what's the magic behind it, right? Because sometimes, as you said, top of the funnel content, right, very often it's not so obvious on the surface what's actually happening in the background
Yeah.
of some business.
Yeah.
So
I guess
yeah,
I
I
think of
love that.
it like in your head before you do something, it's like it's a squiggle. You can also almost picture it there as this big squiggly mess. But there is someone else on the planet who doesn't see it as a squiggle. They just see it as a line. It's like you
Mhm.
start here, then you go here, and then you get here. And all you need to do is talk to that person, and they'll make it sound so easy because they'll just know the process. But as soon as you
Mm.
know even a little part of the process, it'll stop being a squiggle in your head, and it will turn into steps, and then you can follow the steps. And I think it's just a massive, like, it's a massive cheat code for succeeding at anything.
I love that. um a somewhat related question. I was going to ask you that a little bit later, but you seem to be a very clear thinker. You have like these systems and like steps and concepts. Is that, were you always like that? Is that something that came with a lot of writing? Because obviously you wrote a lot of books. You blog, you write for Forbes. You've done a lot of writing. Where does that come from? And maybe before you answer, it's very interesting. I was interviewing somebody who was quite an early Y Combinator founder, and worked directly with Paul Graham and a few others there, and I think did he meet the Stripe founders as well? But like he said, one thing that he found that was very obvious in a lot of the great founders that he met was this clear thinking, that they were just able to articulate their thoughts really well. Paul Graham's famous for his essays. A number of other founders there as well. But back to the question, yeah, is that something that came with practice, or is that one of your strengths, you would say?
I think I've had a few different clear thinking role models along the way that has meant that I've reached the point where I can ask a lot of questions and get to a lot of solutions and turn the mess in the head to clear paths. The first role model was Matilda from the book and the film. And
Yeah.
there's something in that film where or in that book where she says she's never scared to ask a question because she can always learn. And I remember reading that when I was younger and being like, oh, I can always learn. I can always ask a question. And it made asking stupid questions a really safe space for me. So I think I've always asked stupid questions. And often they're not the stupid questions. They're the ones that everyone else is thinking, but other people are too proud to ask, but I'll just ask them. The second role model was Oprah. So she wrote a book called What I Know for Sure. And when I read that book at the time, it became my new favorite book. And I would start journal entries with that phrase at the top, what do I know for sure? And then it forces you to turn the things that are just speculation and not really true and opinion and everything else into like, no, what is real? So then in doing that, you find your truth, and then you can operate based on your truth, and you get very clear about what you are, who you are, and how you want to proceed. And then I think the third thing that's probably made all the difference, other than Matilda and Oprah, is having a serious hobby, or like having a sport as well as a business. Because I don't think that all our best ideas come from when we're right in front of our laptops trying to think of our best ideas. They come when we're doing other things like walking up a mountain, chatting with a friend, in the shower, whatever else.
Yeah.
And I think because I have a business and a sport, when I'm doing the sport, because it's powerlifting, I can't, it's not like I can just on my phone while I'm lifting, because it'd be very dangerous. So I'm forced to switch off from business, which means that my default mode network, the bit in your brain that's just processing, whirring, like taking all the subconscious information on board, it's coming up with solutions, and it's coming up with ways of making sense of everything that's happened that day or that week or whatever I've done before I started lifting. So now I think that there's a big superpower in just switching off and doing something else, and that helps clarity of thought. And then when I get back to my laptop after I've lifted, the answers are just there, and it can feel like they're coming out of nowhere, and maybe some people call it flow or being inspired, but it's pretty much just because you've let your brain switch off and process. And I think clarity of thought comes from processing, but often people don't let themselves process because they're just always on.
Okay, quick break because I need to tell you something. My friend PJ reached out recently because he's hiring a COO, and that's something that you might be interested in. So PJ is the founder of Judge Me. Judge Me is one of the most successful, or the highest rated Shopify apps of all times. They're based in London. They currently have 65 employees. They're growing fast. It's a profitable company. There's a lot you can learn in the COO role. They're looking to grow the company from 7 to 50 million over the next 6 years. And that's something that you can help them achieve. It's an awesome company, great culture, great team. You'll work closely with PJ. You'll learn a lot, and you'll help scale this company. So if that's something you might be interested in, I'll put the link in the show notes. And if the job description is still available, that means that the role is still open. So I encourage you to check it out. And if you're interested, apply. Now, let's go back to the episode. Interesting. So for the exact same reason, I love sauna. It's the exact same thing to what you said right now. You cannot have your phone there. I mean, I guess you could, but you generally don't. And it's, like an hour and a half of just switching between hot and cold. And I think I love that process in general. I think it makes me at least incredibly relaxed, right? I often just call it micro holiday, because it's like an hour and a half in a spa. I just come out of it like after a week of holiday. But and then there's just the aspect of no phone, no screens, no interruptions, nothing, right? And the brain just goes in a different space. Something happens in
Yeah.
there when suddenly you get all these ideas and you're like, oh my god,
Micro
this is what we
holiday.
should
I love
do.
that. And because do you find as well that the first 10 minutes are kind of uncomfortable because
Yeah,
you don't want to do it. You're like, your
yeah,
brain is just inventing these reasons for you to pick up your phone, and it'll trick you. It'll try and be like, oh, you need to write that thing down, or you need to remember that thing, or like,
yeah,
oh, this is
yeah,
really important, but it's not true. And if you just
yeah,
progress through it and get through the discomfort, you end up in this place that feels just completely peaceful.
yeah.
But you have to push through the discomfort to get there.
Yeah, I agree. Especially like I'm always like, oh my god, I need to write this down or I need to call this person. But I think the thing is that like the important ideas are going to stay, right? So you just need to relax, trust it, and at the end, when you get back to your computer, like the important things are going to come up. So
Yeah.
yeah. Good. Okay. Okay. From agency to a sauna and powerlifting, we kind of
Everything. Yeah.
jumped around a little bit, but let's go back to the agency for a moment to hear that whole story. So, 10 years, and then you sold it, and you also, I think, you did a course after that on how to, or you talked also about how to sell your agency, right? So I think that's maybe the interesting aspect of it, because there's a lot of people talk about like growing an agency and starting an agency and so on. I don't think that many people actually necessarily successfully sell it. um, a lot of agencies are not necessarily sellable, or they require a little bit of work before they can be sellable, right? So I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit more about that. How do you actually build an agency that can be sold?
Yes. I'm so glad you asked about this. And yeah, I made a course on it because one of my big I think doing I think how you win at life is you do work that you get paid to do work that you would also do for free. And I think
Mhm.
how you do that is you do cool stuff first and then you teach other people how to do that same cool stuff. I think that's the most fulfilling work you could ever find because you never feel like an imposter because you're only teaching stuff that you've already done. What you're teaching is infinitely valuable because you have the experiential knowledge of doing it. Like we said, you have to talk to people who've been there and done it. And also, you're kind of handing out ace cards to people who are not as far along in their journey, and almost like giving yourself the advice that you wish giving people the advice that you wish you'd had at the time. So it feels like this big paying it forward thing that I just really quite like doing. So
Mhm.
that was why I made the course. I'm not a course creator, but when I sold my agency, I was like, I know so much about this process now, and I didn't know anything at the start. So this is the course that I wish I'd had when I started, and it's just on Udemy, and it's super simple, but it was just a way of condensing it all, putting it out there for someone that it's going to help in the future. But right from the start, I don't think I even set out to start an agency, let alone set out to start an agency that I would one day sell. I just started out trying to get clients instead of getting a job. And then
Mhm.
I would say the 10 years of the business happened in stages, very distinct stages. And the first 3 years were what I affectionately refer to as the Jodie show. And that was because even though I was building a team and the business was growing year on year, it was a cool thing to run, and I was building a team, everything relied on me. And that meant all the team I worked with every single team member. They all reported to me. All the clients still reported to me. I was still doing some delivery work. I was in every client meeting. I was doing sales, admin, marketing, everything. And I'd set the business up to travel, like to have a business that I could run from wherever. And I wanted that freedom and independence that my first car had given me, but I hadn't left the country in 3 years. And so I pretty much set myself a deadline to get rid of this Jodie show operation and turn it into something that did feel sustainable. So I booked a trip to Australia in 3 months' time. It was a 5-week trip, and that became my deadline for sorting out this business and systemizing it. So the second, like in the book 10-year career, there's like a 4-stage framework. And first it's execute. That was my Jodie show phase. Then it's systemized, which was getting the business ready to take trips. And then that started what was 5 years of running a lifestyle business.
Mm-hmm.
And that meant to me that the agency didn't need me to operate. It had people who were looking after the sales department and the customer client delivery department, and the fires that I was called upon to put out got bigger and bigger and bigger because other people could sort them out. And if there was a new fire, there would be a process that we made for it. Someone was in charge of it going forward, and then it meant I was needed less and less and less. And so for 5 years, I traveled for 1 month in every 3. So I went away, lived in a different city, came
Nice.
back, was in Birmingham, UK, my hometown. And that happened on repeat until COVID hit. So we've got the first 3 years, which is the Jodie Show, the next 5 years, which is the lifestyle design phase. And then that was very inspired by the 4-Hour Work Week and the E-Myth. They were the 2 books that inspired that phase. And then March 2020, COVID hit. And in 1 week, we lost 25% of our clients. And so you can have all the SOPs in the world, and no one had an SOP for that at all. So this is the biggest fire that I was called upon to put out. And honestly, it was you just make it up from scratch. You're like, okay, what should we do here? Well, lots of our clients are in hospitality, travel, events. They're having a very, very horrible time. And we took the decision to not do anything like kind of waive contracts and say, oh, you're in this minimum term, you have to give notice or whatever. We were just like, it's fine, it's cool. Like, do what you need to do. We'll figure it out. I remember presenting my team with the problem of, we need to figure this out because we need to replace our client base so that we can keep everyone hired. And I found that when you present capable people with problems, they come up with a lot of solutions. And we just did all of them. We tried everything. We just saw it as this experiment of like, well, we're like, the business is really going downhill right now. We need to do something. So let's try everything. So we went from emailing our mailing list maybe once a year to emailing them once a day. We ran daily webinars on how to do everything on every aspect of social media. And very slowly, we started getting more clients on board, to the point that in the next 5 months, we grew the agency back to its normal size, and then we grew another 20%. And we were still getting clients coming back on board because we'd been nice to them in March 2020. So it was at that point in August 2020 where I felt like I was at this same crossroads that I was at when it was the decision about whether to stay a freelancer or start an agency. And it was like, what do I want to do here? Do I want to go back to this lifestyle phase, like lifestyle design business, where I can just travel, it runs and everything's fine? Or is this now the time to do something else? And the thing that made the decision for me was about the imbalance between my ambition for this agency that I started at 22. I was now 32, and you're such a different person in those two ages. But the imbalance between my ambition for it and what I felt was the capability of the people in my team, because I felt like they were capable of more than my ambition would allow for. And so I would think partly I just got quite excited about the idea of being acquired, a bigger entity taking over, and them being able to do more with like their careers. And at the same time, I could draw a line under that agency, start something new, have a think about what I wanted to do, and have like a kind of clean break. So I followed the same success system to sell it, which was close your eyes, visualize, set the goal. I'm going to sell my agency. Close your eyes, visualize it, feel every part. Like, it's almost like feel what it would feel like to complete on a sale, to be like meeting buyers and feel like you knew which one was the right one. I wrote a pretend check. So over my journal, drew it. I wrote the exact amount I wanted to sell for. I wrote the date I wanted to sell. I signed it, the perfect buyer. And then I just like stared at it and imagined that coming true. And then I spoke to a few people who had already sold their agency, a friend who had bought some agencies underneath hers, and just got a sense of how this process could work. And then the friend who had bought agencies in the past, she put me onto an M&A consultant.
Mm-hmm.
And when I spoke to him, he said, okay, cool. You want to sell your agency? Here's what you need to do. You need processes, you need SOPs, you need other people in charge of departments, you need to like know what you want, you need to have a clear idea of what you're looking for. And I was like, hang on, I've
Got,
done this,
got it.
I've done this, yeah. And so he's like, oh, cool. Well, this would have taken about 8 months of us working together, but you don't need me at all. I can put you straight onto the broker. So I got introduced to this M&A broker, really cool guy, and he very much took that squiggle in my head and turned it into a clear process. So he said, great, this takes about 6 months. And in the first month, we're going to create a one-pager to explain your business, to outline the offer. And then we're going to put that out to our network. We're going to do some cold calling. We're going to call around different other agencies. Like, we felt like it would be a bigger agency who bought us. We're going to call around and we're going to get first meetings booked in. And he called them chemistry meetings. Then when that happens, you're going to have second meetings with the ones you like the best. He also told me like how we would structure the chemistry meetings. So the idea that the buyer talks first and then you talk after, and then there's all these different things that go through. And then he said, and then we'll negotiate, and then you'll get heads of terms, and then we'll complete and you'll do due diligence. He said it would take 6 months. It took 6 months and 2 days. And we sold for the exact amount I wrote on the pretend check. We met the buyer. We met the buyer within 2 weeks of the date I wrote on the pretend check. And in the negotiation, we talked a lot about an earn out, because that's quite big when you sell agencies. They want the buyer. Sorry, the buyer often wants the owner to go with the agency, and that means as a founder, you then have to work for the company that you don't own anymore, for people who you've never worked with before. So
for years, that often goes on for years.
Yeah, so agency average is 3 to 5 years, but because the agency was very self-sufficient, because we had people in charge of different departments, my handover actually took 2 weeks.
Wow.
And
That's
then
unbelievable.
that was it. And then I was done.
That's amazing. So you see, the blueprint works. Like your blueprint for success, it works every time. That's amazing.
I think so. Yeah, I think so. So now I'm like, what else can I apply? Like, what else can we apply it to? But I honestly think everyone can get here if you figure out your success system and then you apply it to other stuff. You build up this confidence that, like, yes, I've got this. It feels like you've got this secret. And then when you set your mind on new things as well, you know exactly how to apply it. And then you have the feeling that you can do it. I've just finished reading. There's a book called How Champions Think by a guy called Dr. Bob Rotella, and it's a really amazing book, and he talks a lot about sport and business. And he said it's this giant misconception that you win championships and then you get confidence, because otherwise, if that was true, no one would ever win for the first time, because they would never have the confidence. It's actually the other way around. So you have to go into everything you're about to do with the confidence. And I think how you do that is by building up your success system, building up confidence through your success system to then apply to bigger stuff. And then when it's like, yeah, I can become a billionaire, or yeah, I can like colonize Mars, or whatever you've got, you've already got that confidence because you've done the little things on the way there.
Yeah, that's one thing that Timo, our friend, also often talks about. He talks about how a lot of founders, what's the word that he usually uses? A lot of founders, they have, you're almost overconfident about something, about yourself, right? You go into something and most people, it's like, well, I don't really know how to do this. I don't know how to approach it, but you go into it anyway. You're like, well, I don't know. I'll just figure it out. I know that I'll figure it out. I think it's that trust in yourself and almost overconfidence about yourself sometimes, because maybe you're not qualified, but you figure it out as you go, right?
They mention that in the How Champions Think book as well. He talks about this phrase overconfidence, and how it's often something that maybe coaches or sports pundits, they'll say like, oh, he's overconfident. But the author just says, you can never be overconfident. Like, I've never seen someone miss something through, or if I've seen someone not achieve something through overconfidence, there's far more times that I've seen someone not achieve something through underconfidence, because underconfidence just leads to not going all in. And you can't tentatively break a world record. You can't like gingerly create this amazing business. Like, you have to go all in. So I'm all for overconfidence. I think it can be a superpower, and it's not a bad thing at all.
I agree. I agree. And when I was talking about it, I already realized that maybe I shouldn't even call it overconfidence, because it almost gives it like this negative connotation. It's just like strong confidence in yourself. That's what it is.
Yeah. Oprah
Um,
also talks about it, actually, as soon as we mention her, because she talks about when someone will say someone is full of themselves. And it's like, it's also said as, it's got these negative connotations, like, oh, they're
yeah.
full of themselves. But she just says, it's, someone only says it about you when they can't handle your bigness. But and really, this idea that someone is full of themselves, like, they love themselves, they're really happy to be them, they believe that they're onto something, that should be celebrated. So Oprah often knows the right thing to say and do, so I believe her in that.
Nice. Good, great. Then, so after the agency, you went on, you explored a bunch of different things, and you wrote your book also. I think that's the latest book, right? The 10-year career,
Yes.
which is about the journey that you just shared, or is that what it's about?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Everything. Yeah. So in the period between businesses, I just ran experiments, and I did some teaching, I did some coaching, I did a lot of powerlifting competitions. I wrote a book to put all the experience of building and selling a business into something where I could be like, this is here now, it exists in the world, and I can kind of draw a line under it. Did the same with the agency course, with the How to Sell Your Agency course, and then figured out that I did definitely want to be a founder again, because lots of the other things that I was doing, they're all outlets for running a business. Like, I like write. I've got a column in Forbes where I write about AI and entrepreneurship and stuff like that, but I don't just want to be a writer. I like it because it's like an outlet for running a business, and the same with teaching and doing everything else. So I took a very roundabout way of realizing that I did really, really enjoy being a founder, but I'd just outgrown the business that I'd been running so far. So then set about finding that new business to really get involved in, with the caveat that my personality, and probably similar for any founders out there, you can almost you can execute, like, you can execute, and so sometimes it's dangerous to let yourself execute on the wrong thing. So coming up with the idea for the new business involved a very slow process of setting up parameters for what the new business had to fulfill, going to like random different places with my husband to get perspective and to come up with the ideas, writing all the ideas down in a spreadsheet, and not letting us, like, not buying domain names, not going forward with anything at all. Yeah, everyone always, yeah, I get that eyebrow raise about the domain
The
names, because
main
like
thing, yeah.
because everyone buys them all the time. Like, we
Yeah.
should all have shares in like GoDaddy or whatever, because it's just constantly like, oh my god, another domain name. That we didn't buy any, even if we were like, oh my god, that's the best idea ever. It was like, no, stop doing it. Keep thinking of ideas and
It's
only
funny
go
because it's
back.
like it's like not buying the domain. It's like the ultimate discipline for an entrepreneur. Like not not
Yeah.
buying a domain when you have an idea.
Yeah, on that, actually, I was late, or didn't manage to get the domain name, jodiecook.ai, so like the .ai for my name. But my friend bought it, and it's so annoying because now he basically trolls me in the most geeky way. When I when I say different phrases to him, he'll like update that domain with the new phrase. So I don't know what it says right now. I could have a look, but it last time it was like, I believe in you, because I'd once said I believe in you. So he's got this. Are you looking? So he's got this really arty background, and it just says
It's still
something
I believe
stupid.
in you, Jodie Cook.
Yeah, there you go. Thanks, John. Thanks, John. Sometimes it's the right thing to do to buy a domain name, but with that situation, it was definitely the right thing to do to not buy a domain name, because it meant that we didn't just have all these like different, almost like, in my head I visualize it like having loads of fishing rods out and loads of lines out. And because I was in such a stage where I'd written a book and written a course, and everything was out of my head, and there were no kind of things to do every single day, like it can feel like when you've got a business. I was so keen on not just casting loads of lines out there. It had to be like one line or the right line and not just
Mm-hmm.
creating mess. So yeah, that was quite a big part of it. And then Coachvox was actually idea 22, but there are 30 ideas on the spreadsheet. And we kept going
Mm-hmm.
after we got the one, but it was the one that we couldn't stop thinking about.
So that was your main criteria then in the end, the one idea that you couldn't stop thinking about.
The idea that we couldn't stop thinking about, it had to be good for the planet, it had to be location independent, it had to have an audience of entrepreneurs, it had to have the potential to become $100 million business. There were probably like 7 different parameters, which I would encourage anyone to do before they start any business. Come up with what's the criteria first, because then you've got your boundaries and then you can come up with all the crazy stuff within there. Because I think it's
Mm-hmm.
really easy to get into this stage where you've got this one idea and then you've got this other idea and then you think that it's that idea or that idea, but really there are thousands of, like hundreds of thousands of ideas that you could do. But come up with the parameters first and then come up with the ideas, keep thinking of the ideas. And then for us, the next stage was just talking to potential customers and running tests and seeing if it was actually viable.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'll note on that. So you talked about visualizing, or like visualizing what kind of business you want, or what kind of life you want, or what outcome you want, right? I will just mention that I do that as well, right? I didn't even mention before, and it's worked incredibly well for me as well. From the business that I run now to my partner, my wife, right? For example, I had a very clear list of points what I want in my ideal partner, and she is to a dot all of that, which is kind of crazy sometimes. When I still look at that list, I'm like, that's kind of insane. How is that even possible? But it works. I don't know. There's something about maybe just knowing what you want, and then maybe you don't settle until you get that. You kind of create that in your life then somehow.
I love that. Do
You
you,
set that
so
standard for
what's her
yourself.
list? What's her list? Do you
I
tick the
don't know what's her
boxes?
list, but she also has that kind of. She always says that she manifested me. So I'm like, well, look, I don't know who
Ah,
manifested who here, but somehow it works.
I love that. Yeah, that's really cool.
um, good. So yeah, that leads us to Coachvox, obviously, right? Let's talk about Coachvox. What is it for a start?
Coachbox is a place where thought leaders and subject matter experts who are often coaches, not all, but often coaches, can make an AI version of them that can
Mm,
coach and mentor their clients and their audience just like they would, sometimes better. So
mm,
we have a system where they it's a really simple kind of process. They upload their content, they configure, like they slide these style sliders to tell the model how to talk in their voice, and then they release it out into the world, maybe after a trial where they test it with some friends, and then they collect email addresses from people in their audience and they see the conversations that their AI has had with those people. And the idea is that these subject matter experts are busy and they are often expensive, but they have
mm,
knowledge, they have framework, they have methods based on their experience that they know helps people. So this allows them to basically combine their content with AI and become infinite and help an infinite number of people.
So sounds like that's the future. I think you are working on something that's probably the not even the long-term future anymore. It's pretty much the short-term future. Whereas it's not the future. What am I saying? It's the present. Like it's working right now.
Yeah.
Um, can you tell a little bit more about, let's say behind the scenes of an AI startup, right? So you guys build an AI product. There's a lot that's being talked about um, right now about just building things on top of AI tools. But I think a lot of people don't know how that actually works. What happens there?
Mm. Well, I think even though it's an AI startup, it's still a business. So I guess we still follow just the business principles of creating something that people love. And I think we just use AI as a tool to be able to do that. But
Mm,
when we first started Coachbox, I had this idea that the agency experience that I'd had was like a kind of agency baggage. Like it would be really hard to let go of that and go from agency to SaaS because they're very different models. Because I guess
Mm-hmm.
at the agency, our clients were worth like thousands per month, but then this is a $99 a month product and it's super different. And I was like, oh, we're going to be carrying agency baggage and that's going to be a really bad thing. But then what I realized was that agency baggage is actually a superpower, because in an agency you're so close to your clients and you get into their heads and you know their problems and you know how to solve them, and you're like, you just think about your clients all the time. And when you apply that to a software model, I think it can be really powerful. So we have a community where we call them creators, the people who are signed up, they are in there, we co-create the platform with them, we hear about how
Mm-hmm.
they're using it. There's one guy called Rob who
That's smart.
he is charging for an AI, he's charging for access to the AI version of him. That feels like the future. We thought it would just be like a lead magnet or to help current clients, maybe inside a membership, which is how most people use it. But he's charging for access to the AI version of him, but he's also using his AI to write his email newsletters and write his blog posts, and his VA used it to write his social
Oh,
media content.
wow.
And we're just like, we didn't know that this is what people were going to use it for, but it makes a lot of sense because it's his content, his style, like it's a predictive model, like it's coming up with the best likely answer to the question, and so it can write things like he would write them. And he has a podcast as well. I did an episode with him a couple of days ago, and he used a combination of Jodie AI and his AI to come up with the questions. This is like, it just blew my mind. But I mean, overall, like, yes, I'm running an AI business, but I don't think of it as like an AI business. I think of it as running a regular business where we have a
Mm-hmm.
very specific target audience, very specific problems we're trying to solve for them, and we talk to them constantly to figure out how we solve those problems. And it just happens that artificial intelligence is a tool that we use to solve them.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Wow, that's fascinating. So this guy, he literally cloned himself. He has a clone of himself who's now helping him. Who's doing it? That is pretty futuristic. I remember Mr. Beast talking about cloning himself, but that was very different. I thought that was quite fascinating as well. So what he did was, without the AI, but what he did was he had people literally live with him and follow him nonstop for like 6 months, and that's how he cloned himself, right? And I mean
Mm-hmm.
that's great because then somebody kind of learns how you think and sees how you operate. But now with Coachvox, you can just upload all your things and you have a clone of yourself, which
Yeah.
is which is pretty amazing.
I think as business owners and teachers or authors or coaches, we're kind of always looking to clone ourselves in some way. But a while ago, like when I turned my business into a lifestyle business, I basically cloned myself with SOPs, because that's
Mm-hmm,
the
mm-hmm,
frameworks
mm-hmm.
and the methods, and it's just in a document. And so this is like a much sexier way of doing that. And no one really wants to engage with an SOP because it's boring. But if someone in my team, like now, our ops manager, she'll go on and she'll use Jodie AI for answering journalist questions about the company, or answering like funding questions about the company, and she'll type it in, and then it will come out with something that's pretty accurate. And it's a much more engaging way of getting those answers. And so when applied to coaching, and when applied to like mentoring or giving someone the frameworks and steps to achieve their own success, they could go and read a book, they could go and watch a YouTube video or do anything, but they have to think to apply it. Whereas if you're talking to an AI version of someone, it's not about them and their content, it's about you and how their content is applied to you. So it's closer to journaling than it is to
Mm-hmm.
reading someone's book, which I think makes it pretty cool. And people come back
Mm.
again and again and again to get AI coaching. And some people actually use their AI to remind themselves of their own frameworks.
Aha, that's nice. Yeah. It's like that makes a lot of sense.
Because if we
That's
all
so
followed
cool.
our own rules, then we do pretty well. But the problem is we don't follow our own rules. We get
Mm.
distracted and we follow other people's rules. But it's like this constant reminder of, well, hang on, this is your ethos. Why aren't you doing that? Keep going back to it again and again and again. And these course corrects back on the to get you back on the right track.
That's a really interesting use case. It's almost like you're consulting yourself on your own business or on your own problems. Because sometimes when you're, when it's your own business, for some reason, it's a little more difficult to look at it very objectively or from very uh, big picture perspective. Like, yeah, you do that, but very often you just kind of forget because you're like so in what's happening. Um, so yeah, that's interesting. Actually, making a clone of yourself who helps you, gives you advice based on your own frameworks and thinking.
Yeah,
Um,
one of the most powerful profession to do that, and we've got quite a few on board, is investors, because they have their rules and principles. If you think like Ray Dalio is the
yes.
OG, like
Oh
he actually wrote
yeah.
a book called Principles, and just
Yeah.
the idea that every investor who's got their principles trains their AI with their principles and then can run any deal decision through that first, so that it's like, oh, I'm thinking about investing in this business. Okay, well, does it hit these parameters? No. Okay, well,
Hmm.
don't do it. But in an AI coaching session, not just a spreadsheet.
Do you have a Ray Dalio coach? I would
He we
talk
would we
to.
would love him to sign up and create an AI version of him. But it's quite, I mean, that's quite a good point. It's the creators themselves who sign up and make the
Yeah, I
AI
understand
versions
that.
of them. We don't want to, like, a real big ethos of Coachvox is AI is stealing our content. Like ChatGPT was trained on 300 billion words, and they are the words of creators. We want to let creators steal it back and get the proceeds of it. So the idea is that anyone who's come out with stuff, we don't just want their information to be used to train LLMs. We want it to be used to grow their mailing list or help their clients or give them a passive income stream, and that's really important. So yeah, we're not making unofficial ones. It's only the real deal.
Got it. Got it. What's going to be Coachvox in 5 years, 10 years?
Oh my goodness, I don't know. It could be. I mean, it could honestly go. It could honestly go anywhere, and we find that the creators are taking it in such different directions that we didn't even know. But one thing that I think about a lot is like the idea that any entrepreneur could have their board of AI coaches, and
Hmm.
they've got lots of different perspectives, and actually the interplay of the conversations between their board being really interesting. Like imagine you're in this simulation where you're there as the real person, but there's a AI facilitator and there's AI participants, and
Mm,
maybe there's a few other people who are AI generated, but it's all there. You're talking about your business. They're talking about, they're like debating on stuff you should do based on their experience. Like, I love the idea that it could be this fully immersive, lots of relevant experience, and that you could feel like you were getting so much value out of it. So maybe something like that. But I don't know. It could be anywhere.
I love the idea of that similar concept was actually, oh man, in which book was it? Think and Grow Rich, or one of those like big famous self-help books where the author says that you need to create your own board of advisors, imaginary
Mm-hmm.
board of advisors, right? But anyone can be on that board. Just think of any person in the world who you respect and just take their photos and put them somewhere in front of you, and that's now your board of advisors, right? And you kind of, if you follow their content or if you know how they think, you can sometimes sort of imagine what their answer might be. If you come with a question, if you come with a problem, you can kind of imagine what they might answer, right? What would it be their perspective? But now imagine actually having that person's knowledge in a chatbot, and you have, Ray Dalio in one seat, and I don't know, Tim Ferriss in the other one, and like whoever is your hero or your, whoever you admire, whoever's opinion you admire, and you bring
Mm,
them a problem, and you're like, okay, guys, let's discuss.
yeah,
that's
yeah.
that's pretty wild.
Well, that's exactly it. But because we are in the we're in the year, or we're in the age of the personal brand, it's not even the Ray Dalio and the Tim Ferriss or whoever's of the world. It's like it's those kind of micro brands. It's those people with like 50,000 followers, but they have these
Hmm.
really good ideas about something. So they generate these, like, they kind of amass super fans, and it's the super fans who do want to hear from them, and they want to be guided by them all the time, but they can't access them, or these,
100%.
like, people are humans, so they want the AI version of them instead. But yeah, it blows my mind every day, the new stuff that comes out and the new things that we hear people are doing with their tools.
That's incredible. Um, Principles. You have your current life principles on your about page, which
Yes.
is just found before this call, and I love that for a few reasons. First of all, the fact that you're clear on your own core principles, I think that already, makes, I guess, decision making a little bit easier, and maybe also for other people to work with you. I think it makes it easier as well because they understand what's kind of how you operate, what's important to you.
Yep.
Um, and I'd love to talk about a few of them. Extreme people get extreme results. Can you
Yeah.
talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. I think that I got that one from, there's a Quora post that Justine Musk, ex-wife of Elon Musk,
Yeah,
wrote.
yeah.
And she used that phrase, extreme people get extreme results. So I think about this a lot because someone could always explain the framework to you or explain the method and make it sound really easy. But that's only like 20% of it. The rest of it is the execution. And often the
Mm,
execution is messy and it's prolific and it's consistent and it involves all the things that the glossy LinkedIn post isn't going to tell you about, which is what about when signups aren't happening? What are you going to do then? Like, how are you going to not give up? Or what about when you don't feel like going to train? Are you get like, what are you going to do then? And the extreme people get extreme results thing just always reminds me to be okay with being extreme. And if you get
mm,
called like obsessed or weird or quirky or intense or all these words, it's okay because that's all there on the journey. And I would so much rather be this extreme version of me to then hit a point that's too far to then have to rein it in than never test the edges and never
mm,
get to the big stage. Um, yeah, extreme people get extreme results. I think it's just a good thing to have. Like you were saying, having your mentor, like as the mentor you want as a picture. Extreme people get extreme results. It's just a really nice phrase to have in front of you, like all the time.
mm-hmm. No, I relate to that so much. I think you could flip it on its head and say average people get average results, right? So now it depends. If that's what you want, then you do the average stuff. But if you want extreme results, you probably have to be extreme. Otherwise, there's no way, unless you're just extremely lucky. Otherwise, you're not going to get extreme results. So I love that, and it's not. I think it has not been obvious to me for a long time that it is required to be extreme, or to do things differently to get different results from everyone else, right?
Yeah, for sure.
There's another one that I've heard a similar version of it a few years ago, and I think it's spot on, and I don't remind myself of it often enough. Go where the money is.
Yes, go where the money is. That to me means people are telling you how they want to spend their money because they're complaining about things and they're telling you about their problems and they're requesting things. And often we're just not listening. But if we're listening, then we find out what they want and we find out what they would pay for. And then we go where the money is. And something that used to happen all the time at my agency is you would get inquiries from people who actually didn't want to buy from you. They just wanted to inquire or they just wanted you to quote or write them a proposal or something, but they weren't actually going to buy. And in focusing on those people, you're basically saying no to new clients who would buy from you. But
Hmm.
it's not that easy to turn down what you think could turn into something in favor of what will actually turn into something. So for me, go where the money is involves running something through a filter of, is this actually going to grow my business? Is this
Mm,
actually going to make the difference? Like you could run your whole to-do list through that filter. What am I doing because I feel like I should do? What am I doing because I'm doing out of guilt? What am I doing because I've always done it? Compared to what am I doing because it's going to make me money or make my deadlift go up or whatever your measure of success is. It doesn't have to be money. It's like go where the
yeah,
something is, where the
yeah.
something is the thing that you really want to achieve. I think all of these rules are all about being honest with yourself and asking like the difficult questions of yourself that will come to the answers that align your actions, because all of these, the 5 life principles, are all to align your actions.
Hmm. One more that I also really like, and I'm curious what's your explanation of it. Win the mental game.
Yes. Win the mental game is about how entrepreneurship is just this entire game of constant reframing. I think that everything that goes wrong is all down to a loss of perspective and therefore a loss of focus. And by everything, I mean burnout, nerves, anxiety. Anything negative involved in entrepreneurship just means that you have lost perspective. You've forgotten that nothing really matters. We're all going to die eventually, and it's okay to just it's okay to see things as experiments. And so when I don't know, you send out a LinkedIn post and it doesn't do very well, it's not a measure of your self-worth. It's not a measure of like how amazing you are as a person or how much people like you. It's just that post just didn't hit the right mark. So if you see stuff as an experiment and you see it as a game, you can detach from the emotions around it and you can just figure out a way forward. But that is all winning the mental game. Because constantly, like, I don't know if you've ever seen there's a film called it's a Pixar film called Inside Out, and it's a girl called Riley, and she's a kid, and she's got these characters in her head, and it's like joy, anger, fear,
Yeah, yeah,
sadness.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Of course, yeah, I've seen it. Yeah.
And so she's got all these characters in her head, and her winning the mental game is choosing when to deploy each of the characters in her head and not just
Hmm.
listening to fear or anger or sadness because
Hmm.
they're shouting the loudest. Because in the game of entrepreneurship, there's always going to be, oh no, this really terrible thing's happening, or oh that like this customer wants that, or there's going to be lots of stuff going on that tries to take you away from what really matters. So regaining perspective and therefore regaining focus feels like the thing that separates good entrepreneurs from great entrepreneurs.
Hmm. Nice. Well, there's a picture that I had on my phone background for a while, which always reminded me of how you maybe shouldn't take life too seriously, or like what you said, we're all gonna die eventually. And it's a quote from, God, I don't know where. It might be just like a random blog post, I don't know, but somewhere on the internet somebody wrote, always remember that you're just a shaved chimp on a big rock that's spinning around and circling around this ball of fire or something. I was like,
Yeah,
oh my God, like that's a pretty wild picture, but it's so true.
yeah, that's funny. I like that.
Just
Yeah, that's so. Me and my husband say something like that as well, actually. But our phrase is just monkeys on a space rock. We're just monkeys.
great.
That's it. Monkeys on a space rock. There's nothing.
That's
But
great.
so much of just entrepreneurship and everything is this giant paradox. Because I think happiness comes from this sweet balance of ambition and contentment. If you've got too much
Mhm.
ambition, you can't be grateful for what you've got. There's
Mm.
no frigging point because you're never going to get there. But if you've got too much contentment, then you're so like safe and happy and cushy that you're not really driving for more. So you have to find the sweet balance. And so on that point, I think it's taking everything really seriously because it's your brand and it's your profession and you're showing up and you're trying to make a difference, but it's taking nothing seriously at the same time, where it's like, well, we're all just having fun together as monkeys on a space rock, so it doesn't really matter. But it's like it's such a paradox. It can seem
Mm.
weird, but I think the key is finding the balance between all those things.
Agree. I agree. Yeah. Um, I was going to ask about. So you mentioned before, prioritizing, right? You need to, well, you need to go where the money is. You need to prioritize your things and your time well. As an entrepreneur, there's always 1,000 things that you could be focused on. Um, you are obviously, so you're building your startup, and you're also doing a lot of writings, as we mentioned before. You write for Forbes, you blog, you are posting stuff on LinkedIn. There's probably more that I might not even know about. How do you think about, I'm not sure what's the best way to ask this question, but how do you think about your time? How do you structure your time or your day in the most, for the biggest impact, I suppose?
There's a framework that I follow. Of course, there's always a framework, but this one's called profession, obsession, decompression.
Oh wow, okay, never heard
And
of it.
the idea that everything, yeah, I just made it up, but it seems to
Ah.
work, and they rhyme. So it's
This
all
is
right.
great.
Anyone
Oh
else
my
is
god.
welcome to use it. So I just think that everything I do has to fit into one of these three buckets, and that's profession, which for me is Coachvox, but the writing is part of that because that's a lot of how we get signups. And then obsession, which for me is my sport of powerlifting because I compete in it and I take it seriously. And the key thing about obsession is it's something that you do outside of work that you don't necessarily get paid for, but it's structured. There's metrics. There's like a measure of success. And then decompression is how I switch off, which for me is like hiking up mountains or having dinners with friends or like something like that. But I don't do anything else other than those three things.
Hmm.
So things like cooking and cleaning, it's like there's always someone else who can do it for you. There's always an amount you could pay to get that done for you that is less than your like hourly rate if you have one. So it always makes sense to do that so that you can focus on your three things. Um, and then another rule of this framework is no multitasking, because we
Hmm.
mentioned right at the start, if you're in the gym but on your phone messing around with businessy stuff, sending emails, you're not benefiting from the subconscious taking over and figuring stuff out while you're doing other things. And no one really wins when you multitask because you're not all in on one thing or all in on the other. So it's really important for me and for this framework that there are lines, like very clear boundaries in between all three. Um, and then the phrase I think of around this framework is your perfect repeatable day. So
Hmm.
as founders, we do not have to subscribe to like weekdays or weekends or bank holidays or like any of the stuff that's just invented for people in jobs. We don't have to do that. So if Saturday and Sunday doesn't work for you as like a weekend, like don't do it. Just do something else instead. Take your day off on like a Wednesday, or I don't know, do it. Run a month instead, where the 13th and the 16th and the 21st are your days off. Like you can reimagine anything. So with that in mind, the idea of the perfect repeatable day is this day that you could have every single day that you could do on repeat. And it's so
Hmm.
sustainable and you love living it so much that it would never feel like a chore, because you'd always be getting up to it and thinking, cool, this is my day. I know what I'm doing. I'm excited about all of it. And so my perfect repeatable day involves chunks of profession, obsession, decompression, but in a really sustainable way that means it could just run on repeat. So that's how I organize everything. And the no multitasking is such a big part of it, because it's like when I've stopped work to go train, that's it. It's a line. Um,
Hmm.
but that's how I do it.
Does that the perfect repeatable day? Does that mean you have an idea of what your perfect day looks like, and then you strive for every day to be as close to that ideal picture as possible?
A lot of it means cutting out decision fatigue and not needing to make decisions around what you're doing. Because
Hmm.
if
Yeah.
every day you had to think, oh, what time am I going to eat? Or what time am I going
Yeah.
to start
Yeah.
working?
Yeah.
Or when am I going to do my creative work? When am I going to do my
Uh,
managerial work? When am I going to train? When am I going to go for a walk? If you had to think about all that stuff every single day, especially if there's two of you, or you're part of a family, then it's like there's so much energy going on making those decisions. So a big part of it is taking out the energy required, because you know that you wake up at 6 a.m. every day. You know that you train from 6:30 till 7:30 every day, and then you work from 8 till 1, or whatever it is. So
hmm.
I put those profession, obsession, decompression chunks into my diary so that that's what happens, and I just do
Yeah.
it.
No, that makes everything so much easier. I think I'm naturally quite inclined toward doing that, quite structured. But also just professionally, as you said, I don't want to think about that. Like if I don't need to think about something, I don't want to think about it. So like everything is in my calendar, right? And everything is like recurring events, whatever, gym, certain tasks that I need to do, they're just going to be there in the calendar. My wife sometimes thinks that I'm kind of insane because it's all so structured, or like clothes, even to the point where if it's not necessary, I'll just wear the same clothes every day, right? Like I have like 10 of the same black t-shirts, and I just pick
Yep.
one. I don't need to think about it. Before I was married, I would just eat the same thing every day. I don't care. I don't want to think too much about food. For me, looking at the food
Yep.
menu is one of the things that gives me the biggest decision fatigue. There are way too many options. I don't want to think about that. I just want to eat
Yep.
what's healthy and what I like every day.
I'm
Um,
so exactly the same. Yeah. And because but just to put it into perspective, it's because we've got bigger goals. Like
yeah,
if we're trying to
exactly. Yeah,
run a bubusiness and get it to this amazing stage and trying to do a sport and get it to an amazing stage, like I don't care if I'm going to eat the same thing every day. It just doesn't matter.
yeah,
And no one cares what I'm wearing. It's like,
yeah,
it's going back to that loss of perspective thing again. It's like, yeah, someone could be like, oh, you're always wearing that top, but like, so what? So what? It
yeah.
doesn't matter because we've got the perspective and we're working on what does matter.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. Yeah, you need to put that perspective on it, because within that very mundane, very structured life, there's and also an insane amount of like chaos and excitement and roller coasters that happen. But it just gives you more brain power to actually think about things that are important, right? Or
Yeah.
things that you enjoy thinking about. Because I don't enjoy thinking about what I'm gonna have for lunch, right? But
No.
I enjoy thinking about other things.
Yes, I'm totally down with
um,
that.
That's funny. That's yeah. I know a lot of people are going to listen to this and they'll say, "Oh my god, you guys are a bit crazy." But um,
Extreme
yeah,
people get
we
extreme
have
results.
boom. That's it. Exactly. Exactly. Um, One final question. I think you potentially answered that already, but what would you say is one skill or habit that's been the most beneficial for you in your business?
Experimenting, seeing everything as an experiment, which comes as
Mm,
part of seeing everything as a game. But the idea that you're just trying everything. You don't have to create like a process and a manual and a repeating task for something straight away. You can try it. You
mm-hmm,
can
mm-hmm,
see how you liked it. You can see what energy it gave you. You can see the results. You can experiment without attaching this like emotional or sense of like self-worth or reading too much into something. You can just go, oh, that didn't work, okay, well, I'm not going to do it again. Or oh,
mm-hmm.
it didn't work, but I can see what change I need to make and therefore I am going to do it. So seeing everything as an experiment, I think, helps you get over the fear of publishing, which is really big, like the fear of showing up, because lots of people are scared to do
Mm-hmm.
it because they're like, oh my goodness, what might someone think? But if you see it as an experiment, then you don't have any of that. So I think that's a big superpower, and it's definitely been the most beneficial for me in business as well.
Nice. Everything is an experiment. Love it. Um, this was a great conversation. I've learned so much. I say this rarely, but I think this is one of the episodes that I'll actually have to re-listen to because I was not making notes while we were talking, but I got a bunch of ideas. So that says a lot. For everyone who's listening, if you enjoyed this, please do share, like, subscribe, whatever you want to do. My objective this year is to get to the top 5% of the most shared podcasts. A year ago, we were in top 15, so I think that's very, very much doable for this year. So yeah, if you liked it, the only way to get there is with your support. Jodie, thank you so much. It was great to actually finally get to meet you. And yeah, I've learned a lot. It was a great conversation.
Thank you so much for having me, Matisse. Much appreciated.